that a responsible regulator has been applying to us. And I think that that will gain some credibility back towards other regulators. But yeah, important point that local laws, where you're selling, will always be in play.
From my standpoint, I don't really have too much to add other than if your customers don't like US dollars, I think you're pretty much okay. But the US has such a wide or long arm of law where they can, so many people transact and it gets to a US nexus that you really find it difficult to operate, and countries like Canada usually follow suit with countries like US. So as you see with the regulations changing, we're going to do similar things. So you're kind of narrowing down your customer base, but that's all I have to add.
Yeah, not much to add other than you really have to think that decision of going offshore through. I mean, are you prepared to move yourself physically to this other jurisdiction? Are you confident you're going to be able to bring or attract talent to that other jurisdiction? And also, you always have to comply with the laws of the jurisdiction in which you do business. I mean, Bermuda just may not be a big enough market to support you. You may want to do business in Canada and the United States, and you have to be careful compliance with those laws, or you wind up, to use an example, some of the CEOs of online poker companies a few years ago who now no longer can travel in or even over U.S. airspace because of the risk of getting arrested. So it's not quite as simple of just picking up your life and moving it to some island offshore. You really do have to think it through, not just in terms of what it's going to mean in terms of a compliance burden, but also is your business going to be able to succeed there, and are you and just how far are you willing to push the compliance risk of doing business from an offshore location.
So Evan, you seem to be implying that I can't just register my business somewhere else and still have my office in Canada and in New York and carry on and not be touched by the regulations
Yes, that is
of these countries.
precisely what I'm litigating. Look, if they can find you, right, they can touch you. I mean, just because you've got a Swiss foundation but you're doing business from downtown Toronto does not mean that the Ontario Securities Commission or any other Canadian regulator with jurisdiction can't walk into your office and assume jurisdiction over your activities, because they are concerned, even if you're not even doing business in Canada, if you're in Canada and you're doing something that's affecting securities markets in another jurisdiction, that is something that the securities commissions are perfectly willing to and have taken jurisdiction over and have sanctioned people in Canada because they're physically present. So yeah, not quite as simple as just sort of establishing some Dropbox, an office space. Yeah, exactly.
Fair. Given that there are so many gray areas and that there are so many places where we're not sure, what are some of those really tough judgment calls and some of those tough decisions that you handle, that you advise on?
I think this is true of all business, but particularly I think in sort of crypto blockchain world, it's about taking smart risks of weighing both the business and legal and other risks and weighing them against the what the market opportunity is, and what are the long-term consequences. Just and again to echo something Dan was saying earlier, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that they've actually engaged in a smart calculus. And I think sort of what are the tough judgment calls? Because of all the gray, I mean, no lawyer is ever going to be able to give you a definitive opinion in this space at this time. What we're going to be able to tell you is to give you some sense of what the relative risks are, and then you have to make a smart decision balancing, the risks against what the business opportunity is. And sometimes the answer may be obvious. The risks are just overwhelming, and you just really shouldn't do that. And sometimes it's a judgment call.
Okay.
For me, it's challenging working for a trading platform or crypto because traditional AML, you can kind of see fast movement of monies kind of will arise some suspicious indicators. But the crypto space, that's what the crypto space is for. It's just a whole bunch of people moving a whole bunch of money, and it's difficult from a profile standpoint. When I was at HSBC, if I see a 19-year-old with $1 million, that's a raising suspicion. But you see these 20-year-olds with taking pictures with backwards hats, and they may have $2 million in crypto, or they may have a lot of money, but they've been in the space since 2011 or even 2016. So you have a lot of instant millionaires and billionaires. It's really difficult to try to get an idea of who your customer is. It doesn't go with traditional protocol of what you would do and what you would see from a transaction point of view.
Yeah, I think certainly a decision that I see a lot of firms grappling with is the trade-off between compliance and the commercial side of the business. So sort of to give you an example, I keep falling back on the regulatory aspect of this, but if I'm, I don't know, if I'm a Bitcoin ATM operator, and a lot of those types of companies don't do any KYC, as we've talked about, know your customer, and it's a real challenge for us in an AML respect, and so there's a real difficulty when we're advising a company like that to say, well, look, we really think you should be doing something around KYC here and putting some controls in place. But that might be to the detriment of their customer base, right? Because their customers that's part of what they like about those services and those products. So and it's not unique to the BTM world. It's the same for exchanges and all types of crypto companies in the industry. So I see that's probably the biggest challenge, and particularly when you get into the conversation around kind of when you're bringing in other stakeholders that you're going to have to keep happy as your organization matures. So, for example, your banking relationships, right? Not only are you going to have to do the right thing by the regulator at some point soon, I think, then there's the banking aspect, and they're going to want to see you doing certain things which might not be totally aligned to where you want the business to grow, at least not in the short term. So you might have to be restricting your business to Canada, for example, when you want it to be international from the word go. You might only be allowed to deal in certain coins, or whatever it may be. So there's a real challenge and a trade-off to be had, and it's something that we struggle with clients to get right on a day-to-day basis, is that trade-off between the commercial and the compliance aspect of their business.
Yeah, from my perspective, one of the challenges on a daily basis is issue spotting, because every time I'm talking to a new client, they have a new set of facts, and like I've said before, the technology is ever changing, and the market is ever changing. So applying all of that and figuring out when securities laws are going to apply and in what way is always challenging, because from the perspective of an ICO, you have the big question of, are we selling a security or not? And you have to go through how many tokens the company wants to issue. Do the tokens get traded anywhere? Who are the nodes who are contributing to the ecosystem? And all of those things kind of fit like a puzzle into kind of deciding where along the spectrum where I might think that they lie. And of course it is a spectrum, so you're never going to get a clear yes or a clear no. And that gets that can get incredibly difficult. Then from the perspective of an exchange, there are securities laws that apply to exchanges that are dealing in securities, and so then the challenge is what we're listing a security, or are we creating a market in a way that we need to be registered as an investment dealer, like it's a typical stockbroker, and you might say, well, of course not, this is totally different. But, as we've said before, the laws are very old and not equipped to deal with this kind of technology in business. So it might kind of intersect in a way that you weren't expecting, but that the regulators might want to apply kind of some investor protection principles, even though common sense might tell you otherwise.
I have a lawyer question that's actually not on the list of questions that I'm talking about, so I'm just going to drop it on you guys.
All right.
So you're talking about, both of you, some interesting edge cases. So the things that don't fit, the things that are a square peg that we're trying to put into a round hole, the things that might make it up to a Supreme Court case. What makes it that edge case? What would be the moment where you look at it and say, that, I will litigate that up to the Supreme Court. That's winnable, that's worth asking the question. That's worth spending the time and effort on.
Well, I mean, to use an example of naming names, I don't want something down to say whether or not something is or is not a security, right? Because as we all know, you've got ranging from Bitcoin through to tokens that someone's issued on Ethereum. There's a whole range of things in between, and they all have different impacts. And it's not at all clear what the dividing line is between what's a security, what's not a security. And yeah, I have had clients who have issued things where absolutely, if the Securities Commissions were to say, we think that's a security, absolutely, there are sets of facts, the way in which it was offered, the functionality it provides, the way in which it was implemented for trading, the ownership of the concentration of ownership of the tokens, the architecture of the nodes. All of those, I think, put together make a compelling case that this is not a security, right? And that's the case I'd love to argue. I'm not sure that the client would necessarily want to argue it, because it probably take 8 years and a lot of money, and they probably don't want to work on that time scale. But there's an example of very live issues of whether or not specific things are or are not securities. And at some point, a lot of these are going to have to be litigated and have to be decided by a Securities Commission or ultimately a court.
Yeah, I think right now regulators are taking the default position that virtually all ICOs are securities. And they don't really have to back that up in the sense of defending it in court, because they're the first level of regulation. If they send a letter to your company saying, we think that what you're doing is a security, they probably have the ability, unless you can successfully advocate, they have the ability to cease trade your coin and essentially shut down your operations. So it's going to take the perfect facts to get up to the Supreme Court. But I think that notwithstanding their kind of desire to regulate virtually everything as a security, I think there could very well be facts where there is a utility token that it doesn't need to be on. There's no desire to have a secondary market of it. Perhaps it gets burned up after use, and there's an unlimited supply. It's like a TTC token. There's no secondary market. Well, I mean, I guess there is a secondary market for TTC tokens, so that's a good point. But not to the point where a regulator would get upset about things. I mean, there's a secondary market in everything. But I think that when you get a bold client with really great facts and who wants to use the technology in a particular way, then I think that it could be a lot of fun to go back and forth with the OSC.
Awesome. So clearly from all the answers, you guys are all at a great place in terms of your careers, you're passionate about what you're doing, you're loving the game that you're in. What's the career advice that you wish someone would have given you 5 or 10 years ago?
Buy Bitcoin. I guess this is not going to be groundbreaking at all, but read everything that you can. This industry is moving so quickly, and it's hard to keep up. It's hard to get to know everybody. But the more that you do of those kinds of things, the better positioned you're going to be educated about issues, to build a great company, or to give great advice to your clients.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, just try a lot of different things. You're all young. I mean, I think it goes back to something you said, Dan, around patience and time, and it's interesting. When I was in my 20, or when I was 20, or when I was just coming out of university, I was like, oh man, I need to get a move on. And now I'm 29 and approaching 30. I'm like, oh man, I need to get a move on. But actually, we've still got a lot of time, right? So, experience different things. Whether that be travel, whether that be within the crypto industry. If you're able to also I think a really valuable skill and something to work towards, not so much a technical skill, but if you have the ability somehow, and when you can gain this experience at university, to kind of be able to translate the technical in a kind of understandable way. I'm not describing that in an understandable way necessarily, but I think there's real value to, particularly in a space like blockchain and crypto, which is a tricky subject to get your head around. There's real value in someone who can kind of translate that really hard to understand technical aspect up to someone, like a client, like if you're doing a consulting engagement, who doesn't have that technical expertise and understanding, but wants to get it, wants to understand it to the level that they need to. That would be my advice, is if you kind of focus on that kind of, and it's really a consulting skill, that's something that's really valuable, but, just get as many experiences as you can, take different courses, read a lot, get involved in the community. There's something that's really great about this community, is that a lot of it's self-organized, like these events, and actually a lot of it's free. You can just go and turn up and listen to some great people, hopefully with some of them, but, which is different to maybe more traditional established communities where you kind of have to pay to play a little bit. And finally, I'd say, you know, on that note, it's a really open community as well. You know, something that I've noticed is no matter what background you're from, what experience you have, you know, if you have an interest and a passion in this space, you know, you're welcome from the start. And that's important. You've got to have a passion for it. Otherwise, everything just becomes a chore at the end of the day.
I'd say take advantage of the ability to have access to so many different people around the world, different positions. Anyone looking for a career in anything that you want to do, there's someone out there that's done it. They're probably on LinkedIn, they're probably writing articles about it. So you have the advantage that you can approach those people. Like when I was growing up and I was in school, and that was probably like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, like I couldn't talk to a CEO. There was no way to access a CEO or have a conversation with a CCO unless I was maybe trying to date their daughter or something. There's no possible way that anyone would talk. Now you can reach out to anyone. You can reach out to your teachers. You can reach out. You can build a community like Mitchell and Shell have done here. You can build a community, get the leverage, and then you can reach out to really anyone. So take advantage of that while it's still that way before people start cutting off that access or charging you for that access. And you see some of the people when they get a certain level, they start charging, it becomes expensive. So surround yourself with as much free content or as much access to people as you can.
Should I? Yeah, my suggestion would be, I guess, twofold. Take risks, smart risks, mind you, and see if you can make your personal interests your professional interests. I'll just take it back to what I said at the beginning of how, like 5 years ago, I looked at Bitcoin. I was like, this is just for criminals, and I didn't see the forest for the trees. I didn't see the the really compelling technological developments that were reflected. I didn't see the social consequences that it might have, and I didn't even see the legal issues that it would raise, other than the obviously criminal ones. And that was very short-sighted. In retrospect, it would have been, even just if I had continued to learn about it, and while there wouldn't have been a legal practice in cryptocurrency in 2012, or at least much of one, it would have been a slightly risky thing to do with a career, but it wouldn't have hurt me in the long run, and it would have today, I think, paid off. So I just use that as an example of not specific to crypto, just taking risks and trying to make something that's personally interesting to you part of what you do as a professional in whatever it is you do.
Yeah, I would echo that. The being authentic, being tenacious, showing that genuine interest in things, and following those trails down the rabbit hole when it's really interesting to you, and trusting that even if it's not a linear path, even if you don't end up doing what you expected to do, you're probably going to be doing something really cool. But then I would add to that, know that all of those questions that you had along the way, so everything you've wondered, everything that you felt unsure about, other people have those same questions and create the content. I absolutely loved that part of Laura's story, that part of her journey when she was learning was that she started compiling this presentation about here's all the questions I've had and the answers to them. And I think that's incredible. I think when you're always thinking that way, when you're always creating that type of content, when you're always putting it out there, you're going to kick a whole bunch of ass. And from there, I think it's a good time to jump into questions from the audience in the spirit of being tenacious and having access to these brilliant minds.
If you don't